Hey guys, it's Caleb from Caleb Trains here today, and in today's video we're going to go ahead and go over my prized possession in the collection and also my favorite steam locomotive of all time, Southern Railway 542. So let's go ahead and get into it. So this locomotive is Lionel Legacy 280 equipped with whistle steam and Bluetooth. Now this locomotive originally did not start out as a Southern locomotive. It has been custom decaled and separately applied parts to make it what it is today. The locomotive actually originally started out as a Lionel Legacy 280 Buffalo Creek and Gully number 4. Now the reason I chose this locomotive was a couple different reasons, and one of the biggest reasons was because it looked a lot like Southern 542. Originally when I was looking at it, I noticed that it already had the white walls, as you can see down here, and it had the white trim on the side of the side steps and stuff. And also the back tender deck was already painted red, which is what Southern 542 has. So pretty much the second I saw it online, I knew I had to have it to customize in the 542. And that process went a little bit something like this. I feel like buying locomotives over scenery. Let's go ahead and see what's online. Yeah, that's about how it went, so. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into all the customizations to help make this locomotive what it is today. So the very first thing I did to the locomotive was I took nail polish remover and I went ahead and scrubbed off all the decals. Now this was no easy task because Lionel, they paint on their numbers. So getting the original numbers off took, I think it was like 2 hours of trying to get them off. And I'm sure there's an easier way to do it than how I did it with nail polish remover, but it seemed to be the only way that I could get them off. And I've custom decaled locomotives in the past, like MTH ones. They seemed a little bit easier to get off, but overall it was a very challenging task. I had to use like an old sock, and then I had to use like a pencil to help hold down the sock while getting it off with the nail polish remover. So it was quite a process, but I'm glad that I was able to. And there's still a little bit of residue from the old like logo on the side. I know you can't really see it on camera, but sometimes in person if the light reflects off of it just right, you can see it. But overall, you don't notice it. And then obviously directly after doing that, I went ahead and I put on the custom decals. Now the custom decals were actually made by K4 Pacific on eBay. I believe that the seller's profiles like K4 custom decals or something. I will leave a link to that seller in the description below, but he does a fantastic job of making these. I actually had them custom printed into the yellow color because the ones that were originally listed were gold, but 542's numbers are actually yellow, so went ahead and got them to print those into yellow, and I could not be happier with how these things turned out. I mean, look at that, they're really sharp. And I did decal every bit of the locomotive where it is in real life. So the hardest one was doing the number boards. I don't know if you can see that there. Now they do not light up anymore. The easiest way to go about it, other than trying to remove the paint and then still make them light up, like the number boards light up, is easier just to take some black Tester's paint and kind of cover up those number boards. And it was well worth it in the end. I think it came out fantastic. And then those were super hard to line up on the headlight, but it was well worth it. And then I put it right here on the sand dome here, and then on the cab, and in real life right now it says A and Y on the side of it, which is the Atlantic and Yakin. The Southern Railroad actually leased it out to them in the later years of its life, but I put the Southern decal because I wanted it to be in its Southern service. And then obviously the tender here. And I did take this off on the back because the place that the 542 on the back is actually where Lionel put a bar. So I didn't put the back 542 because I just didn't think it'd make any sense with that bar in the way. But yeah, I could not be happy with how the re-decaling went. So let's go ahead and get into the next process step. Now this one was a little bit more tricky, but it had to be done to make the locomotive look right. And that next step was actually the number board here. The number board was super tricky in the beginning because I had to figure out how I was going to do it. I was originally going to do a custom metal plate, but I figured using just a 1/8 inch sheet of plastic would actually work better. And what I did was I got custom printed some vinyl decals of 542 I made in Corel Draw. It was really easy to make those. And then I got them custom printed on vinyl, and then I laid that vinyl on the piece of plastic and just cut out around it. Now, getting the old number board off, it was like a metal number board for the number 4, and it was really big for a number board. But Buffalo Creek and Golly, they had a tendency of having the big circle number boards, as you'll see here. But what I ended up doing was just taking a Dremel tool and cutting it off, but still leaving a little bit of a place to mount the number board here. And then I just simply super glued on the number board, and it came out looking fantastic. And then next up on the headlight, I actually got my good buddy Blake, and I'll link his Instagram down below if anybody wants one of these, but I got him to make me a custom headlight visor. Now this visor, I don't know how easy it is to see on camera, but it's actually painted red underneath, just like the real one is. Now I'll flash an image of the real 542 on the screen here. And yeah, it looks fantastic. It completes the whole headlight look. The only difference between the real one and this one is the number boards actually stick out on this one, and when in real life they're flat against the headlight, which is okay. You know, in O-scale, beggars can't be choosers. There's going to be inaccuracies. But yeah, overall it looks very similar to the real thing, and that's what matters to me, because 542 is such a special locomotive to me. And then next up was actually the bell. Now this was the scariest part of this whole process, because I didn't know what I was going to do with it, and I didn't want to screw up the original bell too bad, because you know extra parts can be expensive. You know, about $20 for a bell. So what I ended up doing was the original bell set here, and I cut it clean off, and then I made, using the same plastic I made the number board out of, I ended up making a custom plate that the bell sits on, because in real life, again, I'll show on the screen here, it sits on a plate instead of being mounted kind of like Southern 630's bell is. And by doing that, it means I could reuse the old bell, because it's the correct style of bell mount. And I got super lucky with that. I'm glad I didn't have to buy an extra bell. I was able to just reuse the bell. You know, any chance to save some money is fantastic. So, but yeah, overall, the entire front of this locomotive just came out looking fantastic, and I could not be happier with how it looks. So let's go ahead and get on to the very last thing I did to this locomotive. Now the very last thing I did to this locomotive, I flipped it around so that you can see it better, is actually the white string that goes from the bell to the cab. And the reason I did this is because it's very obvious in real life when you go up to the locomotive where they made the bell string white. It stands out so much against the black locomotive boiler. And so I needed to go ahead and make sure that was represented here, especially where it's an old hand-rung style of bell. I mean, the locomotive was made in 1903, 1904. I can't remember exactly which date. So it fluctuates between sources for some reason, but yeah. I had to put the bell string. This was really challenging because in real life it kind of dips in certain ways, but thankfully the layout of the top of the boiler is very similar to how it is in real life, so I was able to replicate the dipping. I don't know if you can see that. Dips right here, dips a little bit again right there, and then right here there's just a very slight gradual dip right there, and it just came out looking fantastic. And then the hardest to do detail, which wasn't necessary, but I went the extra mile. I don't know how easy it is to see that. I'll put a little arrow on screen pointing it out. There's actually a cord that goes from the cab to the whistle. Now this is not prevalent anymore on the real one, because they've stripped out everything that's not needed right now. It's just cosmetically restored. But back in the day, I'm sure that there was a cord or a lever of some sort that connected from the whistle to the cab. So I wanted to go ahead and add that extra detail just because it's something, it's something that makes the locomotive stand out compared to the original Legacy 280. And I could not be happier with how this thing turned out. I mean, really, it looks very, very similar to the real thing, and that's what matters the most to me with this model. I know that O-scale, like I said before, you can't get everything perfectly accurate, but this is the most accurate I could possibly get something to the real thing. Now, future plans with it, I would like to eventually paint the windows here red, just like the real one is, just the window frames, and then the front window frames I'd like to paint red. But that is a task for another day that will be pretty scary, but well worth it in the end to go ahead and do it. But yeah, overall I could not be happier with how this locomotive turned out. So let's go ahead and get into why this locomotive means so much to me. So back in the day, whenever I was a kid, I'm from North Carolina, so I went to the North Carolina Transportation Museum a lot. And the locomotive that always stood out to me was Southern 542. there was just something about those white wall drivers and just the beautiful red trim on the windows that just really stood out to me. And I've always adored the locomotive ever since I was a kid. I'd love to see it in action one day. But you know, visiting that locomotive and having those memories of it made it mean something to me. And I knew eventually I wanted a model of it. I just didn't know how I wanted to accomplish it. And then once I had seen that Lionel Legacy 280 that came out, I immediately knew what I was going to do. You know, it was going to be an expensive undertaking of a project, but in the end it would be worth it because it's a locomotive that means something to me. You know, I feel like we all have personal connections to locomotives in some way, shape, or form, whether it be, you know, a more mainstream locomotive like 611 or Southern 4501, or if it's kind of the smaller, unnoticed ones. I mean, it's noticed, but not as noticed as those bigger locomotives, Southern 542. And yeah, that's part of the reason why this locomotive means so much to me. And it's another one of those things. I have fond memories of my grandpa taking me to visit the train museum and us being able to look at 542 and take pictures of it together. But you know, just those good memories, and every time I bring the locomotive on the layout, that flooding of good memories comes back to me. You know, it just feels good, you know, and it makes running the locomotive a lot more enjoyable. But yeah, so that's a little bit of my personal history with this locomotive. It will probably forever and always be my favorite locomotive. That's a steam locomotive. I do have a different one that's a favorite diesel, but that's coming soon to the layout as well. So we'll have the, what do you call it, the dynamic duo of my two favorite things in the world, diesel and steam. But yeah, so overall, could not be happier with how this locomotive turned out. It looks super sharp on the layout, especially with the Southern box cars behind it, and then the new green Southern passenger cars I got. Now, back in the day, the locomotive was a fast freight consolidation, was what it was classified as a Class J 280 built by the Southern Railway, and I believe 1903, 1904. Like I said, the dates kind of fluctuate. I've heard two different dates when it was built, not sure which one is actually true. But yeah, overall, fantastic little locomotive. But yeah, that's all that I have for this video. I hope everybody enjoyed this little breakdown of how I made the custom Southern 542. And yeah, I'll see y'all on the flip side.